provide the
demo. I just recorded. So.
Yeah, we can provide the recording to people that got called away for something. Certainly, it's a very busy time for those that are providing food for their neighbors who don't have enough right now. We're really thankful to have today Deborah Weinstein with us from the Coalition on Human Needs, one of our wonderful national partners. I wanted to show you all on our website that we have a new resource up that we've co-published with the Coalition on Human Needs. And let me share my screen so that you can learn how to find this on there. We'll go to it together. So when you go to www.empowermissouri.org, this is how it looks when you open. If you go over to news and updates, there's a part called the COVID-19 call to action. And that's been there a while because we've needed to act about COVID-19 for several months now, but we keep updating it as things change. There are a number of resources there. There's this chart that shows what's in the HEROES Act versus the HEALS Act that we received from the Community Action Partnership. That's a helpful document. And then back in July, we published a report with the Coalition on Human Needs that talked about how things were going in our state and around a number of issues from people having difficulty accessing food and paying their rent, what the health insurance rates were. That report showed some just absolutely glaring racial disparities that break our hearts. And then we updated that recently when the U.S. Census Bureau released the Household Pulse survey recently. So if you click on September report, you get this document that we published on September 15th. And I will admit that we co-released this, but the Deb Weinstein had everything to do with what's in here. She helped us tremendously in preparing this. I did very little editing of it. The main thing is we co-released it in Missouri to the media because sometimes media in Missouri will pay more attention to something that has a Missouri address on it than a Washington, D.C. address. So we were trying to get the attention of Missouri media, and I did do an interview with KOAN, I think is the call letters from Joplin, Missouri yesterday. So we did have some, well, that was on Wednesday. We did have some follow-up from media, and hopefully this is going to pop up in some more places. But this had some absolutely shocking information in it, like that 4 in 10 Missouri households has lost some income between March 13th and August 31st. It goes on to talk about the layoffs in state government, some of the challenges related to the leisure and hospitality jobs dropping a lot, what's happened around pandemic unemployment, and then it has information about food security and paying rent a little bit later in it. We're grateful for the CDC eviction moratorium, but the meter is still running on those families. Unless there's emergency rental assistance, we have a real housing security homelessness challenge out in the future for us. Not to mention that there are a lot of fine landlords out there that do their best to provide some decent housing. There's some bad landlords too, some people that take advantage of folks and aren't quite as valorous as my first description of landlords there. But with them missing those payments too, there's just this ripple effect that the people that can't afford their rent are having a challenge. The landlords are having a challenge. The landlords can't pay for things that they want to pay for. They aren't buying furniture. They aren't buying new vehicles. They're not spending money in the economy, and then it just ripples out. So we are in a mess. And if you've read this morning's Weekly Perspective, I hope you all get up and set your alarm to get our Weekly Perspective at 7 a.m. on Friday mornings, because it is quite the way to start your day. So if you're not reading it already, we hope that you will. You can find that in the same place that I was just at on the website there under News and Updates, Pickwick Weekly Perspective, if it's not already coming to your email box. And this one basically said, what part of crisis does Mitch McConnell not understand? What part of the word crisis why would you try to pass this emaciated package of help at a time when so many people are hurting and our state is in deep trouble? Deb is going to help us understand more about that. We also are joined by Caitlin Whaley from the Department of Social Services today, and we're really grateful to have them with us. I'll talk a little bit more about Caitlin later, but let me tell you a bit about Deb's background. She's been Executive Director of the Coalition on Human Needs since 2003. Prior to that, she served for 9 years as the Director of the Family Income Division at the Children's Defense Fund, a place that we admire a lot, just like we do CHN. And then that was after a decade as Executive Director at the Massachusetts Human Services Coalition. So Deb has been in the public advocacy sphere for a while, fighting for 4 decades for social justice. She's brought groups together from across the nation to fight for fair and common sense federal and state budgets. And we are really thankful to have her with us today. She's one of the places we turn to understand more about what the census data tells us. And we are very thankful to have her spend some time with us this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanette. And believe me, I really do view the joint piece that we put out as a collaboration. I tried to imbue it with the values that you and Empower Missouri expresses all the time, and know that you had room to make sure that it was said correctly. But most important, the point that you raised about the need to get the word out. No set of statistics on a piece of paper or online does any good if the word doesn't get out, and you have the capacity to do that, which is critically important. And we're told over and over again by our allies on the Hill that getting press coverage is really very important in terms of moving this process. So I thank you for that, and thank everyone for the work that you're doing. I did want to talk in a very targeted way about the data that has come out this week and last week, because there is a part of us that might say, well, okay, there's a lot of data that just came out about 2019. In 2019, one version of the statistics showed an unemployment rate on a national basis averaging 3.7%. Actually, the census's own yearly unemployment estimate is even lower. That was then. Now it is a lot worse, and all of the attendant ills, both health and economic, of the pandemic are obviously making themselves felt. So what I want to talk about is some of what we've learned in the data for 2019 should teach us something about where we are right now and the risks that people are facing. And I know that this is a group that is, focused, as it should be, on hunger and anti-hunger issues, but you also understand the interconnectedness between the ability to pay for rent and just all the necessities, and that is very interconnected here. And there's data that allows us to kind of draw a line from last year to today that's important. So the message in part is, yes, there was progress made in 2019. Poverty went down, income went up, but it's the way I put it in something that we wrote about it is that in a way it's heartbreaking, because it shows how tenuous that progress is, and how even in the good times people struggle to make ends meet. And we just did some calculations state by state about a particular issue of how many people or households with incomes below $35,000 a year were paying more than half their income in rent in 2019. And it's a lot. So across the nation, nearly half, 48%, of people with incomes that low, 35,000 or less, were paying more than half their income on rent. In Missouri, that was somewhat lower, but it was still 37%, 37.5%. And I can get these statistics maybe to Jeanette, and she can stick them up because I have some other statistics by race that I think you'll probably want to have. But at any rate, so that was in the good times. In the good times in 2019, more than a third of people, of households whose incomes were as low as 35,000 or less, were paying more than half their income on rent. So those were people on the edge. And then what happened in the pandemic? They were knocked, so many people were knocked off that ledge because, as Jeanette mentioned, such a large number of people were losing income. And so I haven't said as much as I was going to say about some of the 2019 statistics. So let me say just a little bit more. In Missouri, poverty was down to 12.9%. It was 13.2% the previous year. That is a statistically significant difference. Child poverty was 17.1% in Missouri, and that was statistically unchanged. It will show a number that was somewhat higher, but by the calculations that the Census Bureau makes, it really wasn't a statistically significant difference. Interestingly, poverty was somewhat up for seniors for 65 years and older, from 8.2 to 8.9%. Poverty was unchanged for the 18 to 64-year-old group at 12.5%. But of course, again, reminding us of those things that are our warning signs, the people on the edge. Jeanette mentioned the issues by race. That, of course, is a long-term issue, not just the pandemic. And for Blacks, as I've said again, 12.9% was the overall poverty rate. For Blacks, it was more than 21%. For Black children, it was 30.6%. For Latinx or Hispanic people, poverty was 20.5%. For children, it was nearly 29%. And the disparities for white non-Hispanic poverty was a little more than 11%. For children, 16%. Again, I can share that because you have to do some calculations, especially to get that child poverty rate, which I did. So that is, again, this snapshot that says, yeah, there were some improvements for some, but things were still pretty bad for a bunch of people. And that showed how poised they were, how tenuous whatever progress there was, and therefore how at risk people are right now. And so then just leaping ahead to some of that data that that Jeanette showed is in that piece that she shared on the screen. So we know, again, 40% of people in Missouri's households reported someone had lost income from work. More than 13% of Missouri's households were not up to date in their rent, and that was from the period ending at the end of August. And that was true of 17% of households with incomes less than 35,000. That was another little stat that I added, Jeanette, that we didn't have for the piece we did together. 20% of Black households were not up to date in their rent. So again, the point being, and this sort of draws us into the discussion of what's before Congress. There is this eviction moratorium that the Centers for Disease Control ordered, and it goes till the end of this year. We know that there actually was a surge of eviction notices filed, some of them by big landlords across the country, around 900. And the problem with the eviction moratorium is that people have to fill out a form in order to qualify for the moratorium, and many don't know about that. The National Low Income Housing Coalition has a very good explainer and helps people fill out the form, but if they don't know about it, they can be evicted. And that's starting to happen. So we have to be worried about that. But the real issue is, if you know that such large numbers of people are paying more, were in the good times paying more than half their income on rent, if they only were 1 month behind in their rent, and then the moratorium is over, and they have to pay 2 months rent, it doesn't take higher math to see that that would be their entire income, at least, because it's 50% or more of their income on rent. And that means they can't do it. And especially because people are paying, are going to be more than 1 month behind by the time this is over. So what Congress has to understand is that even if people get their old job back or find another job and they have the same income that they had before, and that's a little more favorable than the economy seems to be suggesting it's going to be, they are just not going to be able to pay that back and will be on track for being evicted unless Congress does something. Again, all the interconnectedness, the 2019 data from the census doesn't say a whole lot about hunger, except to say, I think around 11% of people were using SNAP. No, I think actually it was less than that. Using a different source, close to 12% were food insecure in Missouri. That's an average from 2017 to 2019. The newest data is just shocking that over 240,000 households with children reported, this is Missouri, reported they sometimes or often didn't have enough to eat in the past 7 days. That's 15%. But that was shockingly true of nearly 2/3 of Latinx households with children, Latino, Hispanic. We have an unprecedented amount of need. And I don't have to tell you that. You're closer to it than I am. We know that the number of people, even in the data from 2019, were uninsured, actually rose somewhat. I think that was not true in Missouri. I think you showed some improvement in the number uninsured, but in 2020, 30% of Latinx or Hispanic were uninsured, 11% of Blacks uninsured, 9% of whites. So finishing up, in terms of where do things stand on the package, it's not good right now. For a while, it looked like it was very unpromising. In the last few days, there's some glimmerings of hope. And that basically is, there's been some comments from the administration, a tweet from Trump, and a statement from Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, to suggest that they are more interested in a deal. Trump said, Republicans, you should go up in the number that you're talking about. And Mark Meadows, who's one of the most intransigently right-wing in the administration, said the administration's position was that it should be $1.5 trillion in a package. So the previous go-rounds, the negotiations have really been between the administration and the Democrats, not the Senate Republicans. They've been kind of missing in action, and they still are. So that there are these favorable words is somewhat encouraging. We did a call-in day this past week with a lot of other organizations. We need more of that. We need more contacts. Senators Blunt and Hawley, they are people who really need to hear from you, because they could be supportive of at least some parts of this, and have been in the past. So that's kind of where we are. Congress is snagged. Right now, it was supposed to be easier to do the stopgap spending bill so government won't shut down. That they agreed they'd do that separately, and it would be fairly clean. Now, even that's tangled up, particularly with how long it'll run. The Republicans want it to run till December 18th. That is, during the lame duck session, when they'll have one last shot at whatever they want to do, and the Democrats would rather have it go into the next year. We'll see how that turns out. But whether they can manage to eke out a deal, I think what we all need to know is, if they don't, it's not just that it'll wait until after the election. I think it will wind up waiting until January before anything is done. And when I spent all that much time describing this problem of the number of people who, even in the good times, were spending more than half of their income on rent, it's not a matter of speculation as to whether they will face eviction once this moratorium is over. It's a certainty. And the longer we wait, the more we set up this catastrophic situation for millions of people across the country. And so your help contacting your senators is just all important. So that's about the best I can do about where we are.
Well, thank you, Deb. If those folks get evicted, Sarah Owsley, who's on the call here, is our expert on housing issues, and she would hasten to tell you, I'm sure, that there aren't available housing units for them that are affordable. I think, is it 42? We have 42 units for every 100 we need for people living at 30% of area median income, state, looking at the state as a whole. So we have a serious chronic shortage of affordable housing in our state, and our state invests hardly anything in solving that issue. We have really structured ourselves to fail as a state by tying our own hands about raising revenue. We can cut revenue in Missouri and do it. We've done it repeatedly for the last 20 years, but we can't increase revenue without going to a vote of the people for the most part. And our legislature doesn't really want to put an attractive package of how you do that before the voters. There are ways to actually reduce taxes on the lowest income people in our state and generate more income without gouging anybody. That would raise a significant amount of money, but there's no appetite for that kind of discussion in Missouri, unfortunately, right now. Hopefully, we will build that. Deb, one of the things in the report that we published with you in July versus the one in September that baffled me is the change in the number of uninsured people. In July, it said that 9% of whites were uninsured, and that in the September report, it said 6.9%, I think, of whites. It said 50% of blacks were uninsured in the July report, but it went way down to like 11% in September. But I can't believe that suddenly, tens of thousands of Black Missourians found health insurance over that 3-month period. Can you help me understand why that is so different?
Well, I think it lifts up an important caution, and we've tried to catch where there are such big discrepancies, but and not to use the data at all under those circumstances. But sometimes we haven't caught it well enough. But there's two things going on. One is as you get down to the state data and then the subgroups by race or some of the many other categories that they have in this household pulse survey, you get to some pretty small groupings. And when they are small, there can be bumping around from 1 week to the next that is chance because of who happens to be surveyed. Another issue that is significant is if you look at the whole survey, they do say who didn't respond. And sometimes the numbers are very high, and that means it's that much more subject to chance, the ones who did respond. So I know the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, when they did a bigger report, averaged 2 weeks of data to try to smooth out some of those differences.
Mm-hmm.
So that all kind of, those warnings applied to the data in their first round that went through July 21st. Then they took a pause and they started a second round where they changed the survey questions in some instances. And now they're going to be reporting every 2 weeks. The Center on Budget, who have people more expert than I in statistics, are cautioning that just the very fact that they added more questions meant that not more people didn't go all the way to the end of the survey. And so there'd be that many more non-respondents, more chance of inaccuracies. And so some of that is going on. I think we'll try as best we can, and the Center on Budget, and therefore also we are still figuring out some of these issues, but we'll try as best we can to average data together. And there was one of the examples in here that that I was kind of looking at. I didn't use Black data because it just looked weird. I mean, it looked so different from the previous time that I wasn't confident. So it's not a great answer, but it is the appropriate note of caution when
Right.
you're getting down to small subgroups.
Right. Are there other questions for Debbie? Okay, let me summarize where I think the things are in DC and have Deb correct me if I've got it incorrect here. Let's see. I didn't show you Deb's biography earlier. I just read it to you, but there it is. And here's where I think we are on Congress is that on September 10th, Majority Leader McConnell had a vote on a very limited package of 650 billion. It failed 52 to 47, mostly on a party line vote, with Senator Paul, the only GOP member, voting no. You needed 60 to move it forward, so we're still in the position of trying to reach Senator Blunt and Senator Hawley to get McConnell and their colleagues back to the negotiating table. We released this report, and among the things that we saw is that our COVID numbers are looking really bad compared to the rest of the country. Our diagnoses have gone up 9%, whereas the national average has gone down 17%. So there's a big difference there between how Missouri is doing and other states are doing. 40% of Missouri households had lost income. Of those households that had lost income, 22% said they didn't have enough to eat, and 13% of households said they couldn't pay rent. But there were large racial disparities in that, with 40% of Latinx households saying they couldn't pay rent and 20% of Black households saying they couldn't pay rent. What we need to do is to continue to reach out to Senators Blunt and Hawley. Is that about the size of it, Deb?
Absolutely. That, to urge them to talk to their colleagues and to talk to Leader McConnell, that a bill is urgently needed, that they simply can't leave without doing it. And that would be very, very important. And then it was wonderful that Jeanette got some press attention to the urgency of it. And I would just encourage all of you to be thinking if there are other ways you can do that as well. Because the needs are urgent, and the idea that they could go away and it would be months before anything else would be done is, troubling in the extreme.
Okay, so I knew I had one more slide, but I was having trouble finding it. It would be unacceptable to let our senators continue to abandon their constituents, and failure to act could leave us in a situation where we have a flood of evictions after the moratorium ends. And then there's that template that you can use on our website, and that we'll hope you'll share with others. We hope folks will do guest columns and letters to the editor over the next few days. We need to really pick up the pressure. And Deb, it says, you said that there's a little bit of positive movement in that regard, that it was looking more hopeless, but there's a little talk now that
right.
Yeah.
Right. I do think that's why this is so, this timing is so important, because you're starting to get these statements from the administration that they want to see a bill, and a little more of a push along for that could make a very big difference in a lot of people's lives.
Right, great. All right, well, thank you for your offer earlier of sharing those statistics that were from the earlier part of your talk. When you do that, we'll post them on the food security page on the website, so you all can find those. I know that some of that kind of data is helpful to you sometimes when you're writing a grant, to be able to pull out a fact about like child poverty rates in Missouri, things like that. So we'll make those available for people to download. If you'd like to stay with us, Deb, we're going to turn next to Caitlin Whaley. You're welcome to hang in here with us if you can. If you need to get back to other things that you're doing, we'll understand that as well. Caitlin has worked with the Department of Social Services since 2017. She oversees government relations, constituent services, and communications, and has led a lot of their efforts to improve their social media contact with the public and to help people be more aware of what services are available through the department. She graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a BA in political communication and a minor in sociology, and has been a consultant, contract lobbyist, and on the staff with the Missouri House of Representatives in the past. And we are grateful to have her update us on what's going on with the Family Support Division.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. So I don't have a whole lot of new information on food since last month. I would note that Missouri is going to request PSNAP again, so that maximum benefit for all households receiving SNAP, that amounts to roughly about, the average is an extra $100 in grocery benefits for households, but it can range depending, it can mean several hundred extra dollars in households, depending on how their income falls. So the two things I wanted to highlight today, since I didn't have a lot on the food front, were some other announcements that the department made this week on other benefits. I think we're working hard to try and raise awareness about some of the other benefits we offer, because as was spoken to earlier, it's not just one area of people's finances that are feeling the strain. It's kind of everything all at once. So yesterday, the department announced that we were going to be extending the application period, or the deadline for summer LIHEAP, so energy assistance benefits. We had announced previously that we were increasing the amount of benefit individuals are eligible for from a maximum of 300 to a maximum of 600. So yesterday we announced that we were going to extend the application period through September. It normally ends at the beginning. And then we were also going to be raising the FPL, the federal poverty level, for the summer benefits from 135 to 150 in an effort to try and assist people as we're entering those summer months to kind of start to dig out of the hole that we know a lot of people got into when the utilities there's been, with utilities, there's a combination of reasons why people don't get cut off. There's the moratorium on shutoffs on the regulated utilities for a while, and then there are warm weather rules that were in effect until just a couple of weeks ago that would have prevented shutoffs. So we've been working with the utility companies to raise awareness, and certainly would appreciate any help getting the word out that that is a benefit. It's one of our most under accessed benefits is our utility assistance programs. I think people just don't know about it the way they know about some of our other programs. And I'm happy to pass along that press release if you didn't get it. We also, during COVID, we were able to create an online application process for that program because it had previously only been a paper or in-person application with our community action agencies. The other announcement that we made yesterday that I wanted to highlight was around childcare. So we announced that using our childcare subsidy, a combination of our regular childcare subsidy grant and then some extra money that was distributed to the states through the CARES Act specific for childcare, we were allowing families with school-age children who are subsidy eligible. They would normally only be eligible for a part-time subsidy payment for before and after school, but given that many families are struggling with how to care for kids that are doing virtual learning while maintaining their jobs, the department is going to authorize full-time childcare for those school-age children. So hopefully that means that parents will be able to, have a safe place to send their kids and offer a little bit more support to those providers who are, taking care of some of the most vulnerable kids in the state. And that's in conjunction with a number of other special child care benefits we have done through COVID, such as allowing individuals who are searching for work to qualify, and some other, and opening up our transitional levels of childcare to all individuals. So those are the main policy changes that I wanted to talk about that have kind of happened in the last month, but certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. And I don't think I did see that press release about LIHEAP. So if you'll share that with me, we'll start getting out the word about that. That is a very helpful program, and certainly we had a lot of days in a row where it was in the upper 90s in Missouri. So that certainly makes it very hard to afford your utility bill. Utility costs to us are part of your housing cost, and a part of why people are so housing insecure in our state is the combination of the high rents that are over 30%, over 50%, even more sometimes of people's incomes, and then you add in the cost of the utility bill to that too, and it just really makes people housing insecure. And certainly there are some people that part of their lease is that the lease is voided if their utilities are disconnected, and that can create a real crisis for families as well. And I'm glad to hear about the PSNAP. That's good news. Will there be a gap in there, or does it pick back up where the other was going to end?
On PSNAP,
Mm-hmm.
so we haven't had any breaks
Okay.
in PSNAP. So the way the feds have set up the process, we have to request PSNAP new every month after, I think it's after the 15th, you can't apply. So we normally are running right up against that beginning of the month. But there shouldn't be any issues.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Great. Other questions for Caitlin?
Caitlin, has there been any updates moving forward with the pandemic EBT for schools? Is Missouri going to be able to institute that for the fall at all? I know it's been very complicated.
Yeah, there's just with the way that it's been set up at the federal level, they've basically made it impossible.
Yeah.
So it's just not. Yeah.
That's what we thought, but I thought I would just check in again one time to make sure that was really big.
We're continuing to work with DESE and, try and identify those local feeding options.
Okay.
But yeah.
It's not possible. All right.
Is it that the feds are requiring a kind of documentation that we just can't manage because of?
So yes, that and many other things. So, I mean, with the basically you had to have the entire program done, not set up. You had to be completely done distributing benefits by September 31st. And we found out about it about September 1st. And you couldn't just because somebody had received it before, you could not automatically make them eligible. Basically, every school district would have had to tell us on each individual kid that they were both income eligible, and then they would have had to provide us with proof what that specific child's virtual learning schedule was, because you were not, for schools doing hybrids, like 2 days in seat, 2 days out, you were only eligible for like the 2 days you were not in seat. So it was an extremely heavy lift on the schools, was our biggest concern.
Yeah. I hate it when the feds create such a bureaucratic nightmare to access something that you spend way more money on trying to provide it than was received in the benefit, and you just can't really manage that.
I'm sure it sounded great and like it would be very easy to audit, but very, very difficult to administer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Other questions for Caitlin? Okay. Well, one thing that I wanted to ask folks is whether you like third Fridays as a time to meet, or if there's another Friday of the month that would work better for you. We have our smart sentencing calls during the part of the year when the legislature isn't meeting at 11 o'clock on the third Friday, and it occurred to us that it's a little heavy for the staff, especially for Christine, who usually has a forum on the third Friday as well. So it's like boom, boom, boom. We've got one thing after another on the third Fridays. is there another Friday that's particularly good for people, or is this a time that you'd like us to continue to meet on for a monthly call?
And we'll send out a survey to everybody on the list as well to get that, because getting just the 13 responses here, we could probably get more
sure,
responses. So I'll send out an email for survey.
Well, you might put in the chat box for us about whether there's another Friday that works especially well for you, or even you could also say, have you thought about this other day of the week? Because we probably do have some flexibility for how we set this up, and we want it to be at your convenience. We often pick Fridays because when the legislature is meeting, we're pretty glued to the Capitol from Monday through Thursday. So Fridays are when we try to do a lot of our things, and that's why we wind up with that pattern. But we don't have to all be set in our ways in the organization just because JMO is set in JMO's ways. So, all right. Okay, well, we would like to thank everyone. Christine, do you have any other topics you want to make sure that we get to today? Sarah, do you have a topic you want to make sure we get to today? All right, great. Well, I will say that Christine and Sarah are such fine members of our team, and I'm very thankful to them as the director of the policy and organizing team for the excellent work that they do all week long. So thanks to them. I see Nicole McCoy, the president of our organization, the board of directors, is on the call today. Thanks to Nicole for being with us. And we have a new intern on the call this morning, Scarlett O'Shaughnessy. You might make a guess about Scarlett's ethnic heritage from how that name sounds, maybe. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but Scarlett O'Shaughnessy sounds pretty Irish to me. So.
Yeah, that's very Irish.
There we go. All right. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. And we will do a little poll as to what's a good time to meet. And we will be getting together again in October to make sure that we all stay marching along on the same page. Do try to submit some guest columns to your local newspapers about the need to raise SNAP by 15%. Or any of the other things that are in the federal relief package around things like emergency rental assistance, things that will really help get out the word about the possibility to apply for LIHEAP that Caitlin mentioned to us. And if you can't do a guest column, do a letter to the editor. That will be very helpful. Watch our Facebook and Twitter feeds, and please amplify the messages that we put out. All right, thanks for being with us today. Bye-bye.